Hello everyone, this is Pico Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a non-spoiler review of The Batman. Released worldwide in cinemas on Friday the 4th, 2022, it stars Robert Pattison, Zoe Kravitz, Colin Farrell, Andy Serkis, Jeffrey Wright, Paul Dano, John Turturro, and it was directed by Matt Reeves. Now, as we all know, The Batman is the latest reboot live-action adaptation of the iconic DC Comics character. Now, this story centers around billionaire Bruce Wayne within his second year playing the role as Batman, the crime fighter, stroke protector of Gotham City. Now, the city itself is full of corruption with multiple ties to criminal organisations, all under the cover of two politicians campaigning for mayor of Gotham City. We then see a string of murders committed by the Riddler, leaving various riddles and clues for the Batman at each of the crime scenes. Batman and Lieutenant Gordon continue to work together to try and track him down. Things become more complicated when club dancer Selina Kyle gets involved in wanting to gain revenge on the crime mob bosses and wants Batman to help her out. Now, after so much hype and anticipation surrounding this film, is this latest adaptation a standout entry within the long line of live-action Batman movies? Is it amongst the greatest ever, or is it indeed the greatest Batman movie ever? Now, for me, the simple answer to that question is no, but what we do have here is a very solid Batman story that's technically accomplished and finely crafted. Director Matt Reeves no doubt has brought very much of a cinematic sophistication that has a lot of style, atmosphere and mood, especially in the first two-thirds of the movie. So much care and effort has been put in to make this a very serious, brooding and immersive experience, and for a lot of the time the film manages to achieve that. As we all know, the intent of this movie was to present a far more of a noir detective Batman story, and it definitely matches that description. The first half of the film almost completely consists of Batman and Gordon deciphering messages, taking samples of evidence and interrogating suspects, all both in unison together, and it's actually quite a refreshing change to see such a closeness between Batman and Commissioner Gordon in terms of taking down criminals. And this is without doubt one of the most Batman-centric movies in terms of his overall role within a story. We've seen throughout so many of live-action adaptations where Batman has seemingly been overshadowed by the villains within the story, but that definitely isn't the case about this movie. Now, the movie's tone is also helped by a superb musical score from Michael Giacchino, which is so integral to the movie's direction, really doing so much to amp up all of the tension and suspense, particularly in the earlier sequences. It's a fine piece of musical score, and I'd actually say it's actually worthy enough for an Oscar nomination. Now, all of the actors throughout this film perform their roles very well. The standouts within the cast for me was Zoe Kravitz's Selina Kyle. She's very tough, very independent, and probably exhibits the most charisma and personality out of all of the characters. While she isn't quite the fully fledged Catwoman that we've seen from previous live action adaptations, she definitely has a screen presence and confidence about her, and it definitely has me more enthusiastic to see far more performances from the actress throughout her career. Jeffrey Wright overall I think is solid as James Gordon, and in terms of a role he has a very good rapport with Batman, as I mentioned before. I also like John Turturro as Carmel Falcone. He's quite distant from the first half of the film, but as we go definitely towards the two-third part of the film, he becomes far more prominent and far more integral, in particularly to the story surrounding Selina Kyle. Colin Farrell is also good under heavy facial prosthetics as Oswald Cobblepot, and again I wouldn't define this as the definitive take on the Penguin character. He's far more of a typical crime boss rather than a distinctive villain, but I still think overall Colin Farrell has a certain personality and presence throughout this role. The action scenes and choreography are staged very well throughout this film. In particular, there is a standout car chase that we've already seen throughout the trailers involving Batman and Oswald Cobblepot. It's very frenetic and very intense and spectacular, and without question is the most standout sequence throughout the entire movie. So there are a lot of high quality attributes towards this film, but unfortunately there are also a few certain flaws that put this movie below the upper elite entries within Batman live action movies. And it's here where we have to talk about Robert Pattison. Now, so much was debated regarding his casting within the role. Many people talk, of course, about his association with the Twilight franchise and very much his efforts post those movies where he's tried to rebuild his reputation into a far more serious and credible actor. But his interpretation of Batman here is just a bit lifeless, lacking any real charisma or complexity about it. It's well played by Pattison for the direction that they've gone for within this film, but so much of the performance consists of long pensive stares, a softly spoken voice, and it's just a bit bland overall. And since he's the prominent character within the story, this interpretation actually hurts the film overall. Now, when he's in the Batman suit, which is for the majority of the film, he's actually very fine. Any previous issues about his physical presence within the role is shrugged away, because for the most part he looks very convincing within the Batsuit. It's actually in the role as Bruce Wayne. That's why I think the performance actually suffers. There's just no contrast or charisma in terms of his overall personality, and he's actually a bit of a very emo and a very miserable presence for the most of the story. So whilst his performance as Batman is fine, I think overall far more actors have provided a far more better interpretation of Bruce Wayne. I also didn't like Paul Dano's interpretation of the Riddler. It comes across as far more of a jigsaw serial killer rather than the classic egocentric, very smart, savvy and intelligent personality that we always associate with the Riddler. And at many times Paul Dano just overplays it. There were certain sequences involving the Riddler wherever he's portraying his videos on the news where it really comes off far more laughable and comical rather than imposing or scary. Now, of course, it's nowhere near as bad as the over-exaggerated performance that we got from Jim Carrey in Batman Forever, but this is not, for me, the truly special Riddler performance that I was expecting to see from this movie. We then have to talk about the movie's runtime, and so much was speculated about whether at 3 hours that the movie would be simply too long, and the fact is, it is too long. There's easily around 20 to 30 minutes, maybe even more, that could have been cut from this film, and the film would have been better off for it. Perhaps it's the fact that the film just overindulges in all of the mood and the atmosphere that it's trying to create earlier on. There are certain scenes that just drag on far longer than what they should, but I also feel that the film actually loses a lot of its narrative focus 2/3 of the way through, when it shifts more away from the serial killer aspects and far more into an expansive crime drama. It almost feels episodic at this point, and you really do feel the strain the more it delves into smaller subplots. Also, the film's incessant, brooding tone, again at 3 hours long, eventually gets very exhaustive and quite draining, as there's no levity or brevity to actually offset the singular tone that this film has gone for. I really feel that this film will not be quite as accessible or as appealing as previous Batman movies were. Now, so much has been made of the fact that this is very much of a different Batman story that is presenting us with a version of the character that we haven't seen previously before, but when you really analyse and watch this movie, it actually riffs so much, in particularly from the Christopher Nolan films. Throughout this film, in particularly at the beginning, there were so many elements of Batman Begins, and throughout later on Dark Knight, and also towards the climax of Dark Knight Rises. And there are many elements that I dare say that Christopher Nolan's films managed to achieve far more in a superior fashion rather than this movie did. So I didn't quite see the groundbreaking originality that so many people have hoped up when talking about this overall film. Now, depending on your preference, I also feel that the film's realistic tone really lacks a certain comic book flavour and imagination that should be associated with Batman. There's nothing distinctive or truly awe-inspiring about this version whenever he appears on screen. Now, I do feel this is a good interpretation of a Batman. It's a solid interpretation of a Batman, but it's definitely not iconic Batman, which I think is probably the most adept statement for this movie. In terms of a cinematic and filmmaking experience, it's very highly accomplished, but I just feel it was certainly lacking in terms of giving us a true comic book Batman that's truly iconic and truly special and truly distinctive. And whilst this is a very fine movie overall, I'm not quite sure it has the same rewatchable value as what previous Batman films did. So if I had to give a score for the Batman, I would give it a 7.2 out of 10. Overall, I feel it's a Batman movie that's very much adaptable and current for the current movie going climate that we're in right now, but I don't think it's a truly special Batman movie. And I think overall it was 2/3 very good and perhaps very much let down by a very much lackluster third act overall. And along with its overlong runtime and almost incessant serious brooding tone, I think it stops quite short of being the truly iconic Batman to stand alongside other great films that we've experienced in the past. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings and review of the Batman. Let me know what you think in the comments. I will shortly be providing a spoiler review of the movie within the channel, where I will go into far more depth as to what I felt worked and didn't work quite as well within the movie. So look out for that within the channel as well. And of course, I will provide much more coverage as when we get the first figures of the movie's opening weekend at the box office, and whether it does indeed go on to gross $1 billion worldwide, and if it proves to be very much financially successful, what will be the implications and ramifications going forward for any proposed plans regarding the DC Cinematic Universe, and how will it affect already established characters that we've seen previously within the last couple of years. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay safe distances, and I will see you very soon.